Rotary's motto, service above self. It is an international model. And what we do is we put ourselves second and we put servicing others first. We give of our time, we give of our money, of our talents, and we do all kinds of community service projects out there locally as well as internationally.
It's a model that goes way back to the early years of Rotary. You do things because it's the right thing to do, not because it's going to benefit you or your business, but it's just the right thing to do, whether it's something in this community or what we do worldwide.
Our club, Tacoma 8, which is the 8th oldest Rotary club in the world, we're now celebrating our 100th anniversary.
For 100 years, Rotarians have gone about the work of Rotary in Tacoma.
Tacoma was a boomtown in 1910. 80,000 people had moved to the city over a period of just 30 years. And with the population growth came industry, business, and commerce. Local insurance agent Harry Peltier felt the need to bring the business leaders of the city together.
It's amazing to be a part of something that got organized back in 1910 when this was just a very young, raw city. I imagine there was still mud on the streets and that crossover between streetcars and wagons being pulled by horses and logging and tall ships.
For our club to be 100 years old, it's kind of staggering in the sense that it kind of just started out 100 years ago as sort of a good old boys networking group.
It was very exclusive in that only one person in the classification was allowed to join the club. And so you might have a barber, you might have a corporate CEO in some aspect of business, you might have somebody in construction, you might have an architect, and so there was one each. And they confided in each other, and they trusted each other, and they did business with each other.
Rotary 8 was vital to the growth of Tacoma as a city. Rotarians became involved in a variety of programs, from sponsoring road-building projects to financially supporting a local baseball team. Rotary 8's early efforts legitimized Tacoma as a major urban center in the Pacific Northwest.
In 1916, Rotarians with other members of the community looked to purchase a parcel of land, 70,000 acres. A group of 3 citizens went back to D.C., including the current president of the Rotary Club then, Frank Baker, to say, hey, we've got this piece of property, we want to give it to the government to use to house and train military personnel. The trip was successful. The government took the donation of property, named it after Lewis and Clark, and Fort Lewis came into being. And looking at that opportunity to encourage the Army and the government to invest in a military base here in our area has really produced quite a bit of economic and civic accomplishments for Pierce County.
Tacoma 8 began its international service by sponsoring the first foreign Rotary Club in Paris, France in 1920. As recession turned to depression, Rotarians again turned their attentions to Tacoma. Rotary 8 started a business advisory committee to support local business owners. Economic recovery was overshadowed by a world at war, and the club dedicated its efforts to the local soldiers and sailors who were stationed at Fort Lewis.
One of the big projects that the old guys talk about is during World War II. And there would be soldiers home from the war, sailors home from the war. They would go out and celebrate at night and not have any place to sleep.
Our president at the time and another associate who was a pastor made a presentation for the duration dormitory.
We built dorms, and we housed and fed and took care of and had sleeping bags, and we had dorms for these soldiers.
It was totally, a unifying effort on the part of the club. And it's just a matter of being into the community and being aware of what's going on in the community.
If you have more than you need, you share that and you try to give back to the community at large.
The tensions of the Cold War gripped the mindset of the nation as Rotary reflected on its first 50 years of service. In a time of uncertainty, Tacoma 8 chose to celebrate in a way that would inspire hope.
In 1955, the club, in honor of the 50th anniversary of Rotary, decided to give something to the city. So they got 150 species of rhododendron and made a garden out at Point Defiance Park because they felt like that was something that would still be there 100 years later. And they buried a time capsule with a letter to the president of the 2005 club from the president of 1955. They were very concerned about the power of the atom, and we have to think about that time. There was a fear of nuclear war. But he did end the letter saying, I'm optimistic that when you read this, things will be brighter than what people in the club think now in 1955. They planted those rhododendrons as a bright hope for the future.
Tacoma 8 expanded its reach during the 60s and 70s and began to redefine itself to reflect the changing times.
Then in the 80s, just a terrible thing happened to our Rotary Club, and they let women in. And actually, it was in our club, from what I understand, it was very well accepted. And women joined the club, and something happened. We did a little bit more, a few more service projects, and the membership grew and became more diverse, and it was a good thing.
International aid programs became a hallmark of Rotary, as clubs located all over the world began relaying the needs of their communities back to the clubs in the United States. Issues like polio, access to water, and the lack of infrastructure in the Third World inspired Rotarians to act globally.
Starting in 1985, they started just fundraising and fundraising and fundraising. They called it Polio Plus. So every dime that we would send to the Rotary International Foundation was earmarked for polio eradication. And that's how it started.
I went to a convention in Philadelphia, and they said, we want to raise $120 million to wipe out polio around the world. We did 240.
From there, what individual Rotarians have done is decide with their club, they're going to go take a trip and take the vaccine and go out into the villages and immunize babies against polio. We're there, we wear our little yellow aprons and our little yellow hats, and we're taught by the local health professional how to give the drops. The mothers and the daddies and the babies line up, and you cradle them and you open their mouth and you put 2 drops underneath their tongue.
Drops, 2 drops change that kid's life. The kid's never going to have polio. That's huge. It works in conjunction with the water. There's a water sourcing, here's areas that are in dire need, particularly Ethiopia, dire need of water.
The ability for a village to have fresh, clean, accessible water right at their village location, that they're not having to walk miles to get water. It's something that can change the quality of the life. Instead of them focusing on how do we survive day by day, just by getting the water and getting it transported back to the village, that having that fresh water allows them to say, okay, well, what next can we do?
Make this village work, let's go to another village, make this one work, and pretty soon it's going to make big differences. Maybe they can make an impact themselves with the education that the village is learning and try to make something better in the life. So it's small steps, but building foundations.